So today we have a speaker for you. His name, as you can read, is Stephen Kosanovich. He's from cohort 8 of the infamous VFT days. And so without further ado, I present to you Stephen Kosanovich.
Hey. So we have two cohorts here, right? 12 and 13. I need proof this is real, so I'm gonna just take a picture of you guys. Just like pretend you're enjoying yourselves, I guess. Hold on. Wait. All right. Wait. All right. It's good. That's it, really. That's the only reason I came. So.
Show that to Tom.
Yeah. No, I wish he was here because I wanted to bust Tom's balls in front of people. But yeah, so I'm Stephen Kosanovich. I'm an artist at Iron Galaxy Studios. My main focus is character art, but I also jump around between like the environment, concept, and UI team. I just kind of help out where it's needed, but my main focus is character art. I don't know if Rick Hall still calls some artists like wine and cheese artists. Has he said that to you guys? I'm definitely one of those. I mainly have a fine art background. I didn't make much digital art until I came here to FIEA. So I apologize to any programmers. It's probably going to be a little more art heavy, but I tried to put something in here for everyone, so hopefully you'll get something out of it. How many artists are here right now? Okay, that's a good amount. And what about programmers? Programmers, cool. Everybody else like designers and producers and stuff? Any non-FIEANs? No? Okay, cool. That's fine. All right. So, like a lot of artists, when I was a kid, I liked to draw a lot. I was big into drawing monsters. Actually, in preparing for this talk, I was looking through a lot of my sketchbooks, and I guess I did these drawings, this series of monster drawings, and I made a lot of notes with details about the characters. Like this bird, it says wings that have the strength of 100 men. Just like a really weird unit of measurement by the hundreds of men. But at that age, you don't have much talent, right? I didn't show a lot of promise. It was just passion that kind of propels you. You're not really concerned with drawing super sleek, polished drawings. And it's that passion that really leads to the motivation you need to practice all the time. And that motivation is what makes anyone great. There's actually this author, Malcolm Gladwell. That's Wayne Gretzky. That's not Malcolm Gladwell. But this will make sense. Malcolm Gladwell wrote this book called Outliers, and in it he explored a lot of the ideas of what makes so many of the greats good at what they do. And he wanted to know if it was like some innate ability, if it was just luck for some people. And he explored that idea through Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky tells this anecdote that when he was 2 years old, his parents would put him in front of a TV to keep him busy, and they'd play hockey for him. And he was really into the game, watching it, and when the games would end, he would cry. He'd like throw a tantrum. And to him, it was like the world was ending, and that's because he was just obsessed with hockey. He just loved the game so much, and that love for hockey allowed him to engage the sport in ways that no one else had before. There's actually a famous play where he scores a goal from behind the net, and up until that point, it had never been done. And it's not that no one was physically capable of doing that, it just simply hadn't occurred to anyone. He engaged the game so deeply because he was thinking about it all the time, and you have to ask, why was he thinking about the game so deeply? And it's just because he couldn't get it out of his head if he wanted to. He just loved the game so much. I don't bring this up to say I'm the Wayne Gretzky of character art, because I'm not even close to that. But I bring it up because I find comfort in the idea that talent isn't this magical thing that some of us are lucky enough to be born with, but with enough passion and persistence, anyone could really become great at something. And it's particularly poignant as an artist because when you're in school, all of your heroes are the people you're learning from. They're like your desktop wallpapers, your favorite artists, and all that kind of thing. And to think that you can practice hard enough and love it enough to be as good as them someday is it's comforting. So fast forward a little to 2004. That worked. Cool. 2004. I was like 16, 17. I was a junior in high school, and I knew I wanted to work in a creative field. So I came across an article about a graduate school opening in Orlando about game development, and I saw they were giving tours. So I signed up for one of the tours, and I had my mom drive me to Orlando. And when I showed up, there were probably 5 or 6 other people on that tour, and they were all in their mid-20s looking for a graduate program. And the person actually giving that tour was a young Tom Carbone, circa 2004. But he was giving the tour, and there was nothing here. Like, the school was just getting started. He was just like pointing out areas and saying, we'll put TVs there, that'll showcase student games. Students will sit here, this will be a meeting room. And even with the empty building, that was enough to get me excited to see that this could be a reality. So from 16 to my early 20s, like FIEA was my main goal, like that was my end game. So eventually I got accepted into UCF and I joined their art program, their fine art program. Anybody here go through the visual language program that's down the hall? Any artists? Yeah, that was a good program. Actually, a lot of kids from my cohort went through that and it turned out a lot of really good students. But it didn't exist in its current iteration when I was a student around 2006. I think they were still kind of getting that started. So I got involved in the fine art program and just kind of focused on fundamentals. My main focus was drawing and printmaking. And I'm a much better artist today for having done that. But when I made it to FIEA, I was worried that that was a big mistake because I'd never used Photoshop before. I never used Maya. Probably the most complicated program I'd used to make digital art was Microsoft Paint, right, which isn't super complicated. So for the first few months at FIEA, like I was barely surviving. Like it was really difficult. I think our first model and texture a character in 3D, and like I was trying to figure out copy and paste, you know, so like to figure out anatomy in a 3D program was really difficult. But over time, as I realized, like as I became familiar with those programs, I realized that they were tools and anyone can learn how to use a program, but the depth of skill and knowledge that you get from understanding art fundamentals can really transcend any of that. The programs become tools just like charcoal and oil paint. And art fundamentals really and fine art abilities, if you want to survive in the game industry as an artist, it's something that you'll have to get a hold of at some point. You can know the problem or the programs front and back, but if you don't have an understanding of form and anatomy, like if you try to model a character in Maya, but you don't know how a human figure is put together, the character is never going to come together. Not only that, but like that's also something that you're working at no matter how good you are throughout your entire career. So I was a member of Cohort 8. This is a picture of our group. We made Battle Fortress Tortoise, Plush Unite, and Penned. I was really proud to be a part of this group. Cohort 8 turned out like a lot of really talented and creative artists and producers, designers, programmers. I'm much better at my job today for having worked with a lot of them. If you actually look closely at this picture, you'll see that I'm not in it anywhere. I missed picture day, and they found time to Photoshop some people in at a later date. Like you could see some people like aren't seamlessly blended in. So for the sake of the talk, I added myself to the picture, and I think it blends pretty well. You guys can use this on the website if you want as the official picture. But after having been in the industry for 4 years now, I realize how similar the FIEA experience is to the professional game development experience. Right? There's a reason this school is regarded so highly. It's a lot more than just learning how to use software. Learning how to integrate yourself into a team properly, figuring out how to deal with all the interpersonal problems and the drama that arises in a creative situation. If you guys haven't already dealt with that in RPP, I'm sure you'll get a chance to during the capstone projects. But it's all these interactions with your teammates and your classmates that make FIEA such a powerful incubator for creativity, right? We're all here because we're creatives in our own way. And most creatives are experts in the things that they're passionate about, right? Like everybody is super passionate about these super niche things. So if a classmate is really into anthropology, like talk to them about anthropology, learn about anthropology. If somebody's really into Japanese woodblock prints, learn something about woodblock prints. You want to leave this place with a diversity of ideas, and your classmates are probably the best resource for that. I'm not a particularly religious person, but a good friend of mine who attends church regularly, he brought up something that I thought was kind of interesting. He said one of the things he appreciates most about it is that there's a depth to the conversations you can have with complete strangers because there's this assumed topic in the air that's on everyone's mind. And it's a topic that's deeper than conversations about the weather, right? It cuts through small talk. And in a way, the same is true for FIEA, except like the assumed topics in the air are art and game design and film. So ask people questions. If you see a weird book on someone's desk, ask them about it. There are things that I learned from my classmates' passions while I was here that still help creatively inform me today. And like I said earlier, you want to leave this place with inspirations and references that pull from outside of the normal pool of ideas. Some of the most artistically notable games to come out in the last few years have done this. Two of my favorite examples actually are, ooh, that worked well, are Cuphead and Banner Saga. You guys heard of these games? Anybody play a lot of them? Both really inspiring art styles. Cuphead has like a 1920s, 1930s kind of cartoon aesthetic, and Banner Saga has almost like a Nordic Disney feel to it. A lot of drawings I did after I saw the first trailer for Banner Saga had characters with horns. If you look at the way they handle their environments, it's really inspiring. Like those trees, they have these large geometric shapes, and the branches would kind of radiate outward, but they're contained within that shape. Like these large, angular, simple colored icebergs there. And their character design is super inspiring as well. They've got colored outlines instead of using black outlines. There's just more examples of their environments there. But has anybody here heard of Ivan Earl? No? That's all right. I'll tell you about him. This is one of his paintings. And you could automatically see in like just the color palette and the way he handled a lot of these trees here with those geometric shapes. There's some similarities to Banner Saga. If you look at, here's some more shots of some environment paintings he did. The same kind of angular landscapes, the same kind of geometric trees. This is a screenshot from Sleeping Beauty. Ivan Earl was actually an art director at Disney. He was an art director for Sleeping Beauty. And his kind of mark, his painting style is seen in a lot of Disney films from that era. And to be honest, a lot of contemporary animated films are inspired by his work. If you look at like, some shots of Sleeping Beauty, you look, same kind of colored outlines on the characters there. That procession at the bottom there is super similar to that Banner Saga procession. And what they could have simply said was, like, we want our game to look like a Disney film. And they probably would have ended up with, you know, a generic stylized looking game, but it wouldn't have been as exciting and unique. What they said instead was, we want to know what our game would look like through the artistic lens of Disney films from 1959 under the artistic direction of Ivan Earl, right? It's super specific. But by getting so specific and doing research, they were able to filter all these new ideas through their own perspective to create something that felt fresh and exciting. Which brings me to a point that I think is kind of important to make, is there's a fear, this roadblock you want to look out for, that it's this fear of copying other people, right? This fear of copying something. I'm not advocating stealing work or copying something completely, but I can't tell you how many RPP teams I was on where we'd be in the early creative stages of the project and somebody would put up an idea and another person on the team would say, that's been done before. Somebody's already done that. There's this strong desire with students to do something new that's never been seen before, and that's admirable, but a lot of times it can ignore the fact that even the most unique and exciting ideas can be born from other people's solutions to creative problems. There's this book, Steal Like an Artist, by Austin Kleon, and he talks a lot about like where creativity comes from and how to learn from your idols. And there's a quote in there that I find myself going too often. I'll just read it to you guys. He says, "A wonderful flaw about human beings is that we're incapable of making perfect copies. Our failure to copy our heroes is where we discover where our own thing lives. So, copy your heroes. Examine where you fall short. What's in there that makes you look different? That's what you should amplify and transform into your own work." And there's truth in that, right? If you don't simply steal someone's style, but steal the thinking behind that style, you can filter all those ideas through your own experiences, and it creates something new. So, one of my big artistic philosophies on the whole is that, oh wait, this slide, I forgot about this slide. The reason I brought a lot of that up is because it relates to some experiences we had on my capstone project. I was an art lead on Battle Fortress Tortoise, and a big struggle we had on this project was in defining the art style. Nick can attest to this. Where's Nick at? Where's he at? There he is, yeah. Like, I don't know if you changed the way the art program probably works after this based on developing art styles and art guides, but we didn't really have what you guys have now in developing that. Around Vertical Slice, the game didn't really have a visual identity. It was in this kind of visual purgatory. And we were trying to do some stylized things that had some realistic elements. It was a style that didn't exist because it contradicted itself. It didn't really make much sense. And I think the problem was that we had too many cooks in the kitchen. We had a lot of people with a lot of different ideas, and we were trying to please everyone. But it's like what happens when you mix too many colors together. You just kind of get brown. It didn't have a personality. In the end, ultimately, we decided to make it look stylized. And it was interesting to see that as soon as we gave the game a visual identity, people from other disciplines suddenly had something to grab onto, and there was this explosion of ideas because people could picture what the game was. Like, people knew what kind of world the characters lived in, whereas before it was kind of in this brown period. But One of my main artistic philosophies is that you shouldn't really take any half measures when it comes to art. It's a big reason why Wind Waker is one of my favorite games. You only need to look at one screenshot to know what the artistic intent is behind the game. You know what the artists were thinking on this. If you want to make something look stylized, go to the far end of the spectrum. If you want it to look realistic, make it look as gritty as you possibly can. Especially in the early stages, it's important that you go wide and get as weird as you possibly can, and then reel yourself back in, because doing the reverse is incredibly difficult after you've already started production. A AAA game that has actually suffered from a lot of the same problems we suffered from while we were here was Borderlands. I don't know how many of you guys know about this, but they changed their art style like kind of last minute. There's been a lot of cool articles written about it that are super insightful. If you guys haven't read them, please check them out. But on the left there is one of their early mood boards. And I'm going to take a sip of water. But you can see it's like a lot of generic kind of sci-fi images. It doesn't have a lot of personality. Some of the buzzwords and keywords they have in there are, what does this say? Realistic, retro, mechanical, serious, gritty, fantastic. Seeing the words realistic and gritty being paired with fantastic is like an immediate red flag. And you could see how that manifested itself in this screenshot. This is an early screenshot before they came to the more stylized, fun, playful style that it became known for. But by not going far enough in either direction, it ends up looking like either a poorly executed stylized game or a poorly executed realistic game. And that doesn't knock the artist's ability, right? Those artists just didn't have anything to grab onto, nothing to get excited about. It was harder to picture the world that the game lived in. And it's funny, reading the article about this, they called their same period the brown period, right? It's when the game doesn't have an identity. So when you're here, whether it's working on RPP or your capstone, if you come up with an idea, embrace it. Explore that world as much as you possibly can, and I promise you, your experiences here and the games that you make and the characters that you work on, the environments you make, will be all the better for that. Interviews. Stock images are great for these talks. Like, there's so many weird Google stock images. These tend to pop up around capstone time, like you're pretty knee-deep in your capstone experience, so they can sneak up on you. When the faculty starts to offer those, do you guys still do that, the like mock interviews? Take advantage of that. You'd be foolish not to. That's an awesome resource. But a big reason we're here at FIEA and instead of some accounting program or a law program is because we wanted jobs that we were inspired by, that we're excited by, places we're excited to be. We wanted our dream jobs, essentially. So when somebody's here giving a talk from a company, or if you're in an interview, it's important that you look for red flags, right? You want to make sure that these are places that you want to spend your time at. I remember being here, and somebody was giving a talk from a company, and they said, our employees love working weekends. They're just passionate about our project. We don't make them come in, which, like, it's probably BS. Like, it's not true. What that translates to most of the time is we're just bad at scoping our projects, and we're behind. They're just trying to justify it. You're going to be spending a lot of time at the companies you work at, so make sure that they're places that you want to be. A good friend of mine from my cohort, she was an animator, and she ended up working at a company with like a super toxic work environment. There was even like a big expose written about it, about the experiences of some of her coworkers. And when she realized how toxic the work environment was, she couldn't afford to just quit. The marketplace is really competitive for artists, so it's hard to just like quit a job because you're not having a good time. So what she did is just spent time working at her craft after hours. She signed up for a bunch of online courses and mentorship programs taught by Disney employees, and she just spent months beefing up her portfolio. She was able to leverage those new experiences into a bunch of new job opportunities. And your talent is always the best insurance policy you have against a company that mistreats you. So never stop working at it. Even if you're at a company you're comfortable with, if they happen to go out of business, you don't want to find yourself back on the job market and rusty because you just haven't been practicing because you got comfortable. One of the most important points that I can make, faculty will make this point all the time, former FIENs, this is one of the first things they always say, is don't be a jerk, right? That's clear, that seems very obvious, but your reputation in the game industry, it starts when you come here. I work with people from almost every cohort, going as far back as cohort 2, I think. And I promise you, every single one of them remembers the problem students from their cohort. They remember all the bad experiences that they've had with people. Whenever a FIEN sends me their resume, the first thing I do is send it right to my art director because it's almost the FIEN code that you help other FIENs out. But The next thing that I do is find a coworker from that person's cohort and ask them how they were to work with. If more than one person reports problems, it's going to be much harder to snag an interview. Of course, the reverse to all of this is true, right? If you're fun to work with, if you're creative, if people liked you, it doesn't matter how much time has passed since graduation. Your former classmates will always help you out, at least get your foot in the door. So for the last 4 years, I've been at Iron Galaxy Studios. Our CEO, Dave Lang, or he's the founder now, our founder, Dave Lang, normally comes down to give a more expansive talk about our company. So I won't get too into the weeds, but I'll give you guys kind of a brief summary of what we're about. He founded the company in 2008 after some big layoffs at Midway Games. And he started the company with the volatility of the industry in mind. So every business decision from the top down is made with company stability in mind. Our mission statement that he'll bring up often is that he wants it to be a place people could retire from, which in the game industry is kind of rare. He says if you want to put in 30 years at Iron Galaxy and retire from it, you should have that option. And a way we stay so stable is we're always working on a variety of projects. We do, like we did the PlayStation Vita port of Borderlands. We provide tech assistance on a lot of big AAA games. We've done original content, like a lot of the main game we've been working on the last few years has been Killer Instinct. It's good for company stability, but also as an artist, it's a lot more fun. If I was working at a large company, let's say like I was the hair guy and they always came to me to do the hair, I might be working on hair on that same AAA game for a year and a half, 2 years, maybe 3 years, depending on how big it is. The idea of doing the same thing on the same game for 2 years would drive me crazy. But at Iron Galaxy, I could work on, say, like characters on Killer Instinct for 6 months. And then I get to jump onto an internal project and do concepts for 4 months. And then I could do UI on another project for 3 months. It's more creatively stimulating, but also it just helps keep your skills sharp. Another surprise that I found when I came to Iron Galaxy is there's a huge focus on a work-life balance. In one of our early company meetings, our founder, Dave Lang, said that nobody will ever be required to work more than 40 hours a week. You're only required to put in your 8 hours a day, which for the game industry is pretty rare. And I was super skeptical of that at first when I started, but looking back at the last 4 years, it's absolutely true. It's rare that you look around the office after like 7 o'clock and still see a bunch of people there. And it's comforting to think that people could work normal 8-hour days, have dinner with their families, and still have products that come out on time, products that are professional that sell in the marketplace. So around 2011, 2012, we started doing more original content. That's when they opened up the office in Orlando here. I was part of kind of that first wave of Orlando hires. They hired a bunch of artists then. We have an office downtown here in the Chase building. It's like on the 18th, 19th floor. And the office I've been working in for the last year is the Chicago office down there. So one of the big games we've been working on the last 2 years or so now has been Killer Instinct. Anybody here play Killer Instinct or familiar with Killer Instinct? Yeah, so it's like, it started in the 90s. N64, I think, is when the first one came out. Double Helix made the first season of Killer Instinct. It's like a free-to-play game, so it comes out in seasons. We made season 2 and season 3. And I thought it would be cool to kind of take you guys through some of our environment and character creation. You'll notice a lot of our procedures are similar to what you guys do. This is TJ Combo's stage. He's a legacy character. He was in some of the original Killer Instinct games. And with any of those legacy characters, we try to pay homage to their original stages. So in TJ Combo's case, his original stage took place in his gym. So we'll just look for elements that we could try to incorporate in his stage for the newer version of Killer Instinct. So you can see like this one takes place in the remnants of his gym. It's being demolished. Ultratech is like the mega corporation of the Killer Instinct universe, and they're building high rises in his neighborhood, right? So they're knocking everything down, but there's like old, I'm gonna use this pointer. There's old boxing posters there. There's like, I don't even need to use this, but there's like boxing gloves in the punching bag. And then there's like signs in there just announcing like the construction and everything. But with any environment or character, a lot of them start out with mood boards. So this is an example of one of the mood boards that was used for TJ's stage. The art director will pull together a bunch of images of different assets that he'd like to see in the stage, different ideas for lighting scenarios. So there's like some different things with like the neon lights up there. On the bottom here, these are examples of the skybox, like the matte painting that could be on the skybox in the background. And then this is handed off to the concept artist, and he'll do a bunch of thumbnail drawings. So these are some early thumbnails where he was exploring different lighting scenarios, and ultimately they chose that nighttime scene on the top left. So then the concept artist will then blow that up and refine a bunch of the details. This is after we had done a larger sketch, our art director came in and just made some quick notes of things he'd like to see added to the scene here. So then the concept artist will then come in and address a bunch of those requests. And here you can see this is just a comparison between the final environment on the bottom and the original concept. And you could see that some things got moved around. There are things that work in 2D space that just don't translate well to 3D space. Not only that, when you're looking at the stage from the game camera, some things just might not look as good. Like that sign, that neon sign all the way on the left there. From the game camera, at that angle, you'd really only see it during the characters' intros. And it's a big set piece, so we move that up so it's seen more often. And like I mentioned earlier, Double Helix did season 1 of Killer Instinct, so we inherited the game from them. We inherited their engine and everything. And some aspects of that engine were a little outdated. A big thing we wanted to update was the lighting in the game. So for season 3, we went through all the stages and all the characters and refined the lighting and updated the lighting system. So you could see the difference between the two. The newer one's a lot more exciting and dynamic, the play space. Like that neon sign there wasn't projecting any light onto the play space. Those lights under the train tracks there weren't there. Like the alley as it stretches backwards, I may as well use this. Like it was just black, you couldn't see what was going on, so we updated a lot of that. That was a huge job, but it really paid off in the end. So this is a view of the stage from the actual game camera. I thought it would be cool to show you guys the stage from different camera angles, because so often with fighting games you only see it kind of from that one angle. So I thought it would be cool to show you guys kind of what's going on behind the curtain. So if you pull back a little bit, you can see how the stage is kind of floating there. There's this other plane beneath it that has like rubble and rocks. So when you look through these boards there, it just provides the illusion of more depth. But when you look at the stage from above, you'll see that all the buildings there, it's just the facades. It's just the front of the buildings. Like I said earlier, all that matters is how you see the stage from that game camera. It's almost like a play or an opera. It's just these set pieces, and all that matters is how the audience views it from their perspective. So looking at those buildings, we knew that nobody would ever see the top of those. So there's no reason to spend time modeling and texturing the top of those buildings. In the background, we have our concept artist. We'll do a bunch of matte paintings, and we'll block them out into some kind of like loose, basic rudimentary geometry. And ideally, it creates this illusion that you'll go from fully textured and modeled assets to these basic matte painting forms of geometry, then to the final matte painting in the background. And ideally, there's this seamless flow from one to the other. And it helps save a bunch of time. This is Kim Woo's stage. She's another character in Killer Instinct. This takes place kind of in the Chinatown of the Killer Instinct universe. But if you look at it from above, a lot of the same techniques are used. The buildings are all just facades there. You can see the characters at the bottom. Same kind of matte painting scenario going on there. There's some animating planes that go by in the background. You could see there's like an 18-wheeler here and a little van. Those are animating meshes. So when players are fighting, those will get triggered to come into the play space. And then at the bottom, there's these basic geometric shapes with the clothes on the clothesline. That's actually used to project these shadows onto the play space. It makes the ground just look more exciting rather than it just being flat asphalt there. So we employ a lot of those same techniques on our characters. This is AGANOS. He's a character that I got to work on. I worked on him with Tiffany Dow. She was an artist from Cohort 8 as well. And we worked in a character pod together. For a lot of the characters, we split up the work 50-50. So on him, she did a lot of work on the rocks. And I focused mainly on the metal pieces like the mask. But just like with the environment, it'll start with some black and white concepts. The left one's an earlier one. The one on the right, you can see they started refining his silhouette a little more. They made his arm shape a little more aggressive. Plus, I think that original arm shape is like super suggestive. So they probably wanted to clean that up. But then I know they wanted to explore different ideas for the mask, so they played around with adding more faces, and they added that beard there. Here you can see, these are some final paintings that they did for AGANOS. They landed on the one on the right, and a big job that you have as a character artist is to almost work as a translator or an interpreter. Like 2D is one language and 3D is another, and there are things that will look good in 2D and look good in the painting that when you see it in the game, it just won't look as good. So you got to find a way to look for the areas that are the most gripping and the most exciting and amplify them in that final 3D model. And at the same time, you have to look for areas where the concept artist might have done a little hand waving. Like in the mask, you can see it doesn't seem like he's fully articulated a lot of what's going on with those masks there. The toes are a little stubby. So you want to still retain the essence of what's going on in that concept, but you have to make sense of it. So what I did in this case is you have to do a bunch of research. That mask is based on like some ancient Akkadian masks. It's like an ancient civilization. So I did a bunch of research on how those masks were made, how they were sculpted, what they looked like. And that's a good example of being presented with a new problem every day, right? I had no experience with Akkadian masks. I didn't know how they were made, let alone one that had to fit together with two other faces. But that's where working on your craft after hours pays off, right? It's these times when you're presented with new problems where your skills will kind of help fill in some of those blanks. With the toes, those were based on some ancient Greek sculptures. So I looked at how the Greeks and the Romans sculpted and handled their toes. This is the final character model. And you can see just by looking at it, there's automatically some differences between it and the final concept. I think I have a side-by-side here. You can see like the mask, for example, some of the proportions are different. The mask in the concept was smaller, and that's because when you get it in 3D space, when he's fighting and running around, it kind of got lost amidst all the rocks and the plants. We made the expression on his face a little more aggressive to give him more personality. That rock arm and his armor pieces switched sides, and that was actually a request that came in from design. In fighting games, it's important that the characters are able to telegraph all of their moves. A player should be able to see what's going on. So we had to switch all of that around. And these things are almost living until they're out the door. You're not working in this bubble, creating something beautiful and sending it out, and then the world gets to see it. Every step of the way, you're going back and forth with your art director. When it gets in the game, you'll see some things don't work, and you got to go back and readdress some other things. It's always going to be living. Then, after we finish the main model, most characters in Killer Instinct have like a retro variation of their costume. For the legacy characters, we'll use their original costumes from the 90s. For some of these newer characters, we just have to create something new. Also, all the characters have different swappable areas on their mesh that we swap out with accessories. And then all of these characters, the base versions, the retro versions, all the accessories, have to be individually lit per stage. So with each new character and each new stage, that's more work that we have to plan for. So something that was fun for Season 3 of Killer Instinct, we got to work with a lot of Microsoft's other properties. For Season 3, we had Rash from the Battletoads. I got to work on him, which was like a lot. That was one of my highlights so far in working at Iron Galaxy. There's General Ram, or Rom from Gears of War. Is that Ram? Anybody, is it Ram? I should know. I guess I worked on it. But like a big highlight was actually working on the Arbiter. I got to work a little on his in-game mesh. I spent a lot of time working on one of his accessory sets here. And there's an immense amount of pressure you feel to do right by these characters with such big fan bases and legacies. But it was an awesome learning experience getting to create something that exists in the Halo universe. I'd spend a lot of lunch breaks just looking at the model to see how everything was handled. Yeah, it was enlightening. It was super surreal. So I put this in here because so far this represents probably the most surreal experience I've had in game development so far. When you are working in a game with all of your teammates, it's hard to know how the public is going to respond to it. So after it comes out, you Google it all the time. One day I was Googling Killer Instinct and I came across some fan art that like some elementary school kid did. And this was on his DeviantArt page. And he said like I was drawing AGANOS on the bus to school today. And it's surreal because like I remember being that kid. Like I drew my favorite video game characters when I was going to school. And quite often I take a lot of Ubers in Chicago and like they always like to talk to you. And they'll ask me what I do for a living. I'll say I make video games. And the first thing everybody says is, oh, you get to just play video games at work all day? Which like, It's not the case. Like, for some reason, the movie Grandma's Boy has become like a documentary about the game industry to some people. But the next thing that they always ask me is like, well, then what's your favorite part about working there? And I always point to things like this. Like, these things remind you how lucky you are to do what you love for a living. Like, what we're creating inspires other people to make things, and that's a big part of what inspires me to go to work and make things on a regular basis. So, having said all that, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to take them. If you can't think of anything now, feel free to email me whenever you want. I'm on all of the social media sites. So add me, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you have. Yeah, what's up?
So, what other characters have you worked on besides ARGANOS that you got to work on from scratch?
AGANOS was one. Arya, she was like the final boss in season 2. Who else did I work on? I did a little work on Hisako. Rash was probably Rash from Battletoads is probably the one that I did the most work on season 3. I'm trying to think what else. I don't know. I jumped around between a lot of the teams, so like I got to work on the environments and some concept stuff. So it's hard to remember. But I'd say Rash and AGANOS are probably my 2 highlights from that. Hey.
So did Iron Galaxy? What did they do with Dive Kick? Did they make that, or was that internal, or was that something they were helping?
So there's one of our designers who's really active in the fighting game community. His name's Adam Hart, and this was a side project he'd been working on with his wife. And our founder was familiar with him and friendly with him. I think he was actually working at the company at the time. And when our boss found out that he had made it, Dave had already heard of it. So when he found out he had made it, he just talked to him about bringing it into the company. So there was an original Dive Kick demo that was more of like just an internet game. And then we picked it up and made kind of a full release version of it. So that was made mainly in the company.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
You said you have an office downtown Orlando here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a studio here, or what kind of office is it?
Yeah, so there's a studio. There's a bunch of people there, and then there's probably the studio in Chicago has an equal amount of people. We've got people working remotely all over the country. We've got a few guys in Austin. But yeah, our 2 main offices are Chicago and Orlando.
And you're here or Chicago?
I was here for 3 years, and for the last year, I've been in the Chicago office. Hey.
You said mood board earlier. I hadn't actually ever heard that term before.
Oh, mood board? Mood?
Is it mood or moving?
Mood. Like mood. You set a mood. You light some candles. Essential oils. You set a mood. No, it's all good. Hey.
What you guys do in Elder Scrolls Online?
Elder Scrolls, I think the main work that they did on that was more of a tech project. So a lot of the stuff that they did was, I think they just made all the console versions to that. Originally it was just PC, and they brought it to all the consoles. So it was mainly a tech-heavy project. And that's a lot of what Iron Galaxy did before we did more art stuff. It was just providing tech assistance to AAA studios on their projects. Hey.
So, like with Dive Kick, when you bring a game in and then you start expanding on it, what are some of the challenges with that?
I'm trying to remember. That was like one of the first games that I got to work on. So like all of the challenges, like I didn't know if they were just normal video game development challenges. But there's always a challenge in working on your own IP because there's almost more pressure because you have control of everything, which can almost be, it's almost more difficult for you because you don't have these restrictions put on by some outside force. Anybody in the back that I missed? I don't want like anybody to be stuck with their hand in the air. Cool.
So similarly, when you take something like Borderlands that was built for the PC and was more intensive, and then you put it on something like a small portable system like the Vita, kind of what was the major challenges? Well, I guess that would be more of a tech challenge, but well, no, actually, you have to make I'm sure you had to do some stuff with the art to simplify it, maybe, or
Yeah. A lot of the work that the artist did was optimizing a lot of their meshes. A big thing, if you play Borderlands on Vita, you'll notice like all the bodies just explode with blood when you kill them, and it's because like there's no way we could have all those bodies sitting on the ground. The game just wouldn't have run. So there's like certain, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. There's concessions that you have to make just to get the game running.
Do you have like particular themes or art styles or an artist that you really like or that really inspires you? And then do
do you incorporate that sort of inspiration into your own work, and how do you do something like that? How do you communicate what you draw inspiration from precisely to your audience?
That's actually, when I interview people, that's the first question I always ask them. And it's, the reason you ask that is not because there's a right answer, right? There's not like one artist that's better than all the others, but you ask that question to get a sense for how passionate somebody is about art. If somebody goes on for 45 minutes about artists they like, that's what you want to see. Like, you want to see that the artist you're hiring is just genuinely interested in art, not only making UI or some menus for a game, but like they like art in general. But if I had to pick artists I like, there's this guy, Corey Loftus. He's a character designer for Disney. He designed a lot of characters for Zootopia. He's got a super cool art style. Like a lot of the old guys from Disney, like Ivan Durrell's one of my favorite artists. That's a big reason I put him in there. If you look at Francisco Goya, the old printmaker and painter, his prints are super cool. He made some prints about like the Spanish aristocracy. It was called Los Caprichos or something, but he drew them all as these weird mangled animals. Those were really inspiring. Those are really cool. How you bring it into your work is like, I don't know, maybe it just like manifests itself in the way your drawings are. When you're working on a project, you're restricted by your art director and all these things, and you like try to squeeze some things in there. You see what you could get away with. Like I said, you start as weird, as wide as you can, and let them reel you back in. But for the most part, if you're practicing all the time and studying something, it'll manifest itself automatically in your work. It's kind of where your style comes from. You know, you don't work at having a style, it just grows on its own.
What made you go more towards characters over environment, and like what was the deciding factor for that choice?
I mean, it's probably like goes back to that drawing I did when I was a kid. You know, just playing with action figures, the next logical step is like to make up your own ones. Not only that, environments are hard. Like there's a lot of really, there's awesome environment painters, even classical environment painters, that are horrible at painting characters. And the reverse is true. There's a lot of people that are really good at painting and drawing characters that can't do environments at all. Just like a different skill set, and making characters was more fun to me. Do you have your hand back there, Ron?
Yeah, thanks for coming down, Stephen.
It's a pleasure.
My question would be, every time I go downtown now, I can't go down there without bumping into somebody from my jail, which I love. So it seems like there's just a growing group of finds down there in particular. How would you describe the culture's like?
I mean, it's basically FIEA. That's why I got out. That's why I left. I needed to be free. No, it's like, I didn't mean that. No, I mean, it's super similar to FIEA. Same kind of playful atmosphere. There's like ping pong tables there, playing ping pong all the time. Most of the people that I went to school with got hired with me at the same time. So it was like the same kind of transition, the same kind of interactions I was having with people, except it was just in a professional setting. Like we're making money instead of just toiling.
I've been told that you find a style or a game or something that you really want to work for, and that's how you model your portfolio, is to sort of reflect that. How true is that with people you've worked with and with your own portfolio of pick a style and stick with it for the game you want?
I mean, it depends. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into only being good at one style, but like if you want to get a job at, say, Naughty Dog, have stuff that looks like their work, because you're going to be brought onto their team and you have to make stuff that looks like theirs. If you want to work at a stylized place, have some stylized stuff in there. But it's good to have a variety. But you definitely, if you know you're applying like at Epic, make sure your portfolio reflects stuff that they do. I've seen a lot of portfolios of artists where they'll be like, look at this cool lighter I made in 3D, or look at this cool handgun I made in 3D. And that stuff's like cool. It shows that you know how to use the programs, but it's not exciting. Like if you're looking through a bunch of portfolios and you see like a handgun and a generator and a juicer, and then you see somebody's like really cool sculpt of a head, like one's more inspiring than the other. Hey.
So do you guys pick like new games often at AGANOS?
You mean like employees?
Yes.
We do something, it's like every few months we'll have like a show and tell pitch day kind of thing where people just show off projects that they've been working on their own time, just so other employees can see what people are doing. Sometimes employees will ask people from other disciplines just to just help them on the side. Those don't always manifest themselves into games with the company, but if somebody presented something that was really cool, like there'd be no reason why we wouldn't pursue it, you know, if it made business sense. Back in that Triforce shirt.
All right.
I got you. I see you.
I know you already mentioned that there is great value to get from learning from our fellow peers. advice you can give as a former FIEA for us to make the most out of our experience here?
What kind of ties into that, you know Glenn Keane? Everybody heard of Glenn Keane? He's like a famous Disney animator. He animated Tarzan. He really developed a lot of their animation styles. One of the things that he always says to artists and creative people in general is don't just look at art in like video games to inspire yourself. Like, take part in activities in the world. Like, some of the most creative artists don't just study paintings all day. They also like go skydiving. They like hiking. They're really into driving cars, you know. They're passionate about other things, like play violin or play a bunch of instruments. You just want to have this passion for life in general, and that can inform your art in ways that is hard to quantify, right? It's hard to like put a number on how that expresses itself, but that's a big part of where a lot of inspiration comes from that people sometimes miss.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you start at an entry-level position at Iron Galaxy, or did you go in as a character artist?
I started actually as a concept intern. I was mainly doing concept art. But my main focus was, like, I wanted to be a character artist, but that was how I was able to get my foot in the door. That's a big part of why, like, having a diverse array of talents can help, right? Because you could kind of wedge yourself in, and then as you get to know the company, you can move up and move to what you want to do. And they're super open to that. A guy that sits next to me at work started in QA and was passionate about doing particle effects, so we did that on the side, and now he's, like, our full-time particle effects guy, and he does a lot of the particles for Killer Instinct. Is that it? 3, 2, 1.
When making your portfolio, did you put any traditional art in, like any sculptures or drawings?
Yeah, I had like one section that was like a bunch of sketches and paintings and stuff like that. You just want to be careful with that kind of thing because you don't want to like throw too much in there because somebody has to look at probably a lot of portfolios. But it's important to show that you have those art fundamental abilities and you know how to draw and sculpt because, like I said earlier, that informs all the work you do in 3D. So I definitely have that in there. I update my Instagram all the time. You're supposed to, as an artist, be really active in creating art on the side and sharing it with people. I follow a lot of artists on Instagram, and it's amazing how often you could reach out to like big name artists and they'll actually get back to you with advice. Cool.
Can I follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, everybody can. Everybody can, please. But yeah, by all means, if you have more questions later, like add me on Facebook, reach out to me in email. Like I'm always open to being friends with FIENs. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.